I saw myself on the screen, but it wasn't me. It was a twisted version cut and mocked for thousands to laugh at. They called me crazy, senile, pathetic, all inside my own home. And my son, he didn't stop it. He started it. If you think this is just another family story, you're dead wrong. Subscribe now to catch more episodes that will leave you speechless. Under the warm breath of an early autumn morning, Redwood stirred like a forgotten chapter in an old book, familiar, faded, and inexplicably comforting. The trees that lined the streets were already shedding their leaves in slow, golden spirals, carpeting the sidewalks in ochre and rust. Homes built in the early 1900s, each with its own weather-beaten porch and crooked mailbox, stood like proud witnesses of time. The air smelled of cinnamon bread, chimney smoke, and pine sap. On Elm Street, at the very end of a narrow cul-de-sac, stood a 2-story cedarwood house with green shutters that blinked against the sunlight. It was here that Madeline Hargrove had lived for the past 43 years. A widow for the last 15, she had long since traded noise for quiet and companionship for routine. Her days began early with classical music softly playing through her old radio, a cup of black tea steeping by the windowsill, and a pair of gardening gloves waiting by the back door. Madeline, 75, carried herself with the sort of grace only solitude could cultivate. Her gray hair was always pinned neatly in a bun. Her movements were deliberate, each step calculated, never rushed. There was something poetic about the way she watered her succulents, how she pressed her fingertips gently into the soil, as if asking it for permission. Books lay scattered across her reading room, poetry biographies, battered volumes of Chekhov, and a dog-eared copy of Little Women she had read aloud to her late husband during his final days. She wasn't lonely, not exactly. But there were long stretches of silence that echoed too loud even for someone who had made peace with being alone. That was why she didn't mind the occasional knock at the door. Morning. Mrs. Madeline came the familiar voice of Noah Griggs, the boy from 2 doors down. He was 11, awkward, bright-eyed, perpetually smudged with dirt or fingerprints from screens. He always carried a backpack full of gadgets, tangled wires, and some invention he was working on. Madeline had known Noah since he was 4. He'd once wandered into her backyard chasing a paper airplane, and since then he never really left. They had an unspoken routine. He'd knock. She'd open. He'd plop down on her porch steps explaining his latest coding project or drone upgrade in language she barely understood. She'd listen nodding, sipping her tea. Sometimes he'd bring her cookies he baked with his mom. Other times he'd silently fix her ancient toaster with a screwdriver and a grin. "You know," he said one morning, picking at the frayed edge of her doormat, "I read somewhere that cedarwood homes are better for your mental health. Less static or something." Madeline chuckled. "My house doesn't need therapy, Noah. But thank you for your diagnosis." He grinned, "Just saying, it's scientifically cozy." Moments like that reminded her that connection didn't always need to come in grand gestures. Sometimes it was a boy on a porch and a woman sipping tea. Later that week, change rolled into Redwood in the form of a black SUV and a moving truck. It pulled into the driveway of the vacant house next to Madeline's, once owned by an elderly couple who had relocated to Arizona. The for rent sign had vanished overnight. In its place stood 2 people, Tyler and Jenna. They were young, late 20s, maybe early 30s, both dressed like they'd stepped out of an Instagram reel, stylish, curated casual. Tyler wore a flannel shirt rolled up at the sleeves, his forearms tanned and tattooed. Jenna had a long wool coat, a wide-brimmed hat, and a camera slung across her shoulder. She looked like she collected latte art for a living. Madeline watched from her upstairs window, curiosity piqued. New neighbors were rare. Most people in Redwood stayed until they were buried beneath it. The next day, as she was trimming her basil, she heard a knock at her fence. "Hi there, I'm Jenna, and this is my husband Tyler. We just moved in next door and wanted to say hello." Her voice was upbeat but not exaggerated. Polite, warm. Madeline wiped her hands on her apron and walked over. "Madeline, nice to meet you both." "We love your garden," Tyler added. "Seriously, it's like Pinterest goals, Madeline smiled faintly. It's mostly weeds dressed up as herbs. But thank you, they laughed. Tyler leaned slightly over the fence. If you ever need help with anything lifting boxes, fixing leaks, I'm pretty handy. Much appreciated. There was something about them, an ease in their posture, the way they looked at each other and at her, that didn't feel forced. Just two young people trying to build a life. In the following days, their presence became gently woven into her routine. Madeline would find a small bouquet of fresh daisies hanging from her doorknob, a handwritten note. From the garden down the lane, but we thought it suited yours better. J&T. When her mailbox creaked open one morning, she saw a homemade pumpkin bread wrapped in cloth still warm. Noah teased her about her mysterious bread benefactor, but Madeline smiled without saying much. For the first time in years, she found herself looking forward to the sounds of life next door. The thud of moving boxes, music humming softly through open windows, and laughter that echoed into twilight. She didn't realize how much she'd missed being part of something, however small, until it found her again. One afternoon, as she sat on her porch with a blanket over her knees and a cup of mint tea in her hands, Jenna came by with a basket of apples. "These are from the market up in Cedar Ridge," Jenna said. "Thought you might like to make a pie." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "You think I bake?" Jenna shrugged, smiling. "You look like someone who knows how to turn a kitchen into magic." The comment lingered with her long after Jenna left. It had been a long time since anyone called her anything other than ma'am, missus, or that sweet old lady with the plants. There was a familiarity growing here, a rhythm, one that didn't feel invasive. That evening, she sat at her kitchen table peeling apples in careful spirals. She baked the pie, her first in over a decade, and brought 2 slices next door, still warm on a porcelain plate wrapped in foil. Tyler answered the door in socks and a hoodie. "You're kidding," he said, wide-eyed. "This smells like Thanksgiving." Madeline only smiled. "You gave me the apples. Seemed only right." Jenna came to the door behind him, brushing hair from her eyes. "You didn't have to, but... wow. Thank you." Madeline turned to leave, but paused. "I was told I turned kitchens into magic. Had to see if the myth still holds." They laughed, and she walked away with the softest weight in her chest, something she hadn't carried in years. Hope. Days turned to weeks. Noah kept dropping by sometimes with new AI experiments, sometimes just to sit and quietly eat pie. Madeline began to talk more. About the town, about her late husband, who used to call her Maddie only when he wanted her to laugh. About the radio station they listened to every morning for 40 years. About how she missed the sound of another fork clinking against hers at dinner, and the couple next door. They were always there. Tyler once helped her rehang a painting in the living room when she casually mentioned her ladder was too shaky. Jenna started bringing her camera into the garden, taking photos of bees dancing on lavender. One evening, they even invited Madeline for soup and jazz music on their back patio. She declined, but the invitation mattered. There was a thawing inside her, a quiet, unspoken promise that maybe this chapter wouldn't be written in solitude after all. And yet beneath it all, beneath the golden skies, the apple pies, the laughter echoing from 2 homes, something moved like a shadow in a locked room, unseen, undisturbed, waiting. The kind of thing you don't notice until it's already crept too close. Under the early October sun, the fence between Madeline's and the neighbor's yard had become something of an informal meeting line. A rake would rest against one side, a basket of bread on the other, or sometimes just the sound of idle conversation drifting through the slats. Tyler had taken to fixing small things around her property without ever needing to be asked. The mailbox hinge, the creaky gate, the loose panel on the side of her garden shed. He never made a fuss about it, just showed up with a toolbox and a warm smile that said, "No problem at all, ma'am." "You've got a bit of rot on that fence post," he mentioned one morning, crouched in the dirt with a gloved hand inspecting the base. "If you don't mind, I could reinforce it. Only take an hour." Madeline, standing with pruning shears and a wary expression, nodded. "If you insist." Jenna wasn't far behind. She seemed to glide in and out of Madeline's kitchen like a breeze, always bearing something wrapped in a napkin, still warm banana muffins, a rustic sourdough loaf, chocolate crinkle cookies that crumbled just right. She carried the easy cheer of someone who had grown up charming teachers and checkout clerks with practiced warmth. "Tyler says you used to teach," Jenna said one afternoon, leaning on the porch rail. "You have that wise but witty aura. It's very comforting." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "I taught high school literature. Wise wasn't the word they used. Tough was more popular." Jenna laughed light and musical. "Even better. Kids need a little tough these days." It was odd, this blooming affection. Madeline didn't know what to make of it. Her years had conditioned her to accept kindness with suspicion. But Tyler and Jenna were consistent. Always there, always helping, always smiling in that particular way that made it hard to doubt them. Redwood had always been a town where people kept to themselves, cordial but distant. These two were different. The real surprise came on a breezy Sunday afternoon. Madeline was sitting at her small desk sorting through old bills when the doorbell rang. Jenna stood there, her eyes bright, holding a covered pie dish. "Apple cranberry tart," she said, "but that's not why I came." Madeline tilted her head. Jenna hesitated, then motioned toward the porch swing. "Do you have a minute?" They sat together in the crisp air. Tyler soon joined, leaning casually against the porch column, hands in his pockets. There was a brief silence. Then Tyler cleared his throat. "So, we've been thinking about something," he said slowly. "It's a little unusual, but maybe hopefully you'll hear us out." Madeline narrowed her eyes, not unkindly. "Go on." "Well," Jenna began, "we noticed the roof on your main house has some serious wear. A few shingles gone. There's a dip near the back gutter. Could get ugly with the first snow." "I'm aware," Madeline said flatly. Tyler nodded. "Of course. But we also know that fixing it could be a hassle. Getting up there, hiring the right people, dealing with contractors, it's a lot. So we had a thought." Here it came. Madeline braced herself. "What if Jenna said carefully you moved into our place, temporarily? Just a few weeks while we help coordinate the repairs. We'd cover the labor. You'd have peace and quiet without all the banging overhead. It'd be a win-win." Silence fell between them. The suggestion floated in the air like the sudden drop in temperature, crisp and unexpected. Madeline looked from one face to the other. She felt something twist inside her. Not offense, not suspicion, but emotion. That dangerous, vulnerable swell that came when someone offered to help not out of duty, but out of something gentler, kindness. She began, then stopped. Her fingers tightened around the arms of her chair. "We only offer because we care," Jenna added softly. "We see you as part of our family here. I lost my grandma 2 years ago, and I guess in a strange way you remind me of her." It was a cheap line, maybe, but the way she said it, eyes moist, voice cracking slightly, made it land. Madeline looked away. Her throat felt dry. "That house is full of memories," she murmured. "And it'll still be yours," Tyler said. "We won't change anything without asking. Just patch up the roof, maybe repaint a shutter, that's all." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood up, smoothing the front of her sweater. "I'll think about it." That night, the house felt different. Madeline wandered from room to room like a ghost, her fingers tracing the edge of old photographs, the frame of the window where her husband used to sit with the paper. Her tea grew cold beside the armchair. On her nightstand was a photo of her and Roger, her late husband, taken 25 years ago at the Redwood Fair. They were laughing. She wore a blue scarf. He wore mustard on his shirt. It was one of the last pictures before his illness began. She picked it up, stared at it for a long time. "Would you have said yes?" she whispered into the silence. There was no answer, only the soft hum of the heater kicking on. The next morning, Madeline walked over to Jenna and Tyler's house. Her knuckles hovered over the door for a moment before knocking. Jenna opened, surprised. "Hey." "I'll do it," Madeline said simply. And just like that, things moved fast, too fast. Tyler brought over papers and informal agreement. Nothing legal, just a written understanding of the arrangement. They'd pay for all roof repairs. She'd occupy their guest room. They'd check in daily to ensure everything was comfortable. Jenna helped her pack. Not much, just clothes, her tea tins, a few books, a framed photo or two. I want you to feel at home, Jenna said as she arranged a vase of daisies in the guest room. Madeline took it all in. The house was newer, brighter. White curtains, a polished kitchen, a scent of lemon and cedarwood. It lacked the creaks and smells of her own home. It felt like a hotel pretending to be a home. Still she nodded, "It's lovely." Later she stood at the threshold of her old house, staring at it like one might at a sleeping animal, something too sacred to disturb. Tyler was already on the roof assessing the shingles. "We'll take good care of it," he called down. Madeline smiled faintly. "I hope so." She locked the front door, tucking the key into her coat pocket. Then she turned and walked away, the wind picking up around her, carrying with it the brittle scent of dry leaves and something else she couldn't quite name. Trust, maybe, or hope, or just the quiet ache of letting go, if only for a while. As she stepped into Jenna and Tyler's house, she had no idea she had just opened the first door in a hall of illusions. Under the hush of a cloudy Tuesday morning, Tyler stood in Madeline's living room with a cordless drill and a GoPro no one had asked about. The house was empty now, or so it seemed, silent and polite in its absence, as if it resented being occupied by someone who didn't belong. The air still smelled faintly of lavender sachets and old wood polish. But there was no creak of her slippers on the hardwood floor, no kettle whistling from the kitchen. Just the sound of Tyler tightening screws into the beams above her fireplace mantel. "Angle's good," he muttered, stepping back to check the frame on his phone screen. "Catches the whole room, even the chair." The chair. It was Madeline's favorite, a threadbare recliner by the window where she used to sit and read for hours. Tyler zoomed in on it, the floral pattern catching the light like a relic from another era. He adjusted the lens one final time and walked to the hallway. There were 2 more cameras, one nestled behind a vase in the foyer, and another wedged discreetly in a bookshelf facing the kitchen. No wires, all cloud-synced, all hidden. By the time Jenna returned from her coffee run, the house had been converted from a sanctuary of memory into a stage. Tyler handed her a tablet. "Check this out." Jenna tapped play. The footage rolled empty rooms, quiet angles, eerie stillness. She grinned. "Feels like we're watching a ghost documentary." "No," Tyler said, already pulling a blonde gray wig from his backpack. "Feels like we're about to go viral." Jenna changed in the master bedroom, throwing on one of Madeline's spare cardigans, stuffing tissue in the shoulders to mimic her frame, and smearing a hint of flour on her cheeks for that soft, aging look. It was all very calculated. Performance. In the kitchen, Tyler adjusted the lighting and handed her a wooden spoon. "Okay," he said, pressing record. "You're mad at the fireplace again. It called you irrelevant." Jenna pursed her lips, hunched forward slightly, and adopted a feeble, trembling posture. "You don't talk to me like that, Harold. I've been ignoring you for 52 years, and I can keep going." Tyler wheezed. Give me more." She began swatting the air with the spoon, muttering, "Ungrateful brick bastard. I knitted you socks once." He cut. "Perfect." They edited that night, cutting in zoom effects, quirky subtitles, dramatic music, and a final freeze frame where Jenna pointed at the camera and yelled, "Your thermostat's a liar." The clip was titled Granny vs. Fireplace Battle of 2025. Tyler uploaded it to TikTok under the username @ElderFailTV. What followed wasn't fame, not at first, but it was something close. Within 24 hours, the video had crossed 10,000 views. By the end of the week, it was sitting at 173,000 and climbing. Comments flooded in. "OMG, I can't. Who is she? This is gold. I want a series. Where do you find people like this? Please make her argue with a toaster next." Jenna refreshed the page every hour like it was a slot machine that kept paying out. Tyler started talking about sponsorship, sketch series, maybe even a docu-style mockumentary. "She's a character," he told Jenna one night, staring at the next batch of footage they'd secretly captured. Real clips of Madeline from the surveillance cameras, edited to look like she was talking to herself in nonsensical riddles. That kind of authenticity can't be faked. "Except we are faking it," Jenna replied with a shrug, scrolling through costume options. "Yeah, but no one cares. It's comedy." They justified it easily. To them, Madeline wasn't a person anymore. She was content. Her home was a set, her silence permission, her quirks ammunition. And somewhere across town, in a smaller guest room lit by morning sun, Madeline sat sipping tea from a borrowed mug, blissfully unaware of the cruel theater being staged in her absence. It was a Thursday when it all cracked open small like a hairline fracture, but enough to make the room spin sideways. Noah had burst through the door that afternoon holding his phone. "You have to see this," he said, face bright with excitement. "It's insane." Madeline looked up from her jigsaw puzzle. "What is it?" He slid onto the couch beside her and tapped on a video. The screen lit up with Jenna dressed as an old woman shouting at a fireplace. The captions were ridiculous, the music was loud, and the voice. Madeline tilted her head. "Is this supposed to be comedy?" she asked. Noah nodded. "Yeah, it's all over my For You page. I think it's some improv actress. Kinda reminds me of..." He trailed off, because Madeline had gone still, utterly still. Her eyes locked on the grainy background of the video. The armchair, the fireplace, the grandfather clock in the corner that had belonged to her parents. She slowly reached for the tablet, rewound the video, froze the frame. She murmured, "That's my house." Noah looked again, and then his face changed. "Wait, that's your actual fireplace." Madeline didn't answer. Her hand was trembling slightly, not from age this time, but from something colder. The laugh track in the video looped in the background like a blade against her ribs. She recognized the cardigan, one of hers left in the hallway closet, and the spoon God it was from her drawer, the pale green enamel one Roger had bought at a thrift shop during their first Thanksgiving. She pressed pause. "Where did you find this?" she asked quietly. Noah swallowed. "It was just trending." Madeline placed the tablet on the table, her knuckles white against her teacup. "They've been inside my home," she said, "filming, mocking." Noah didn't know what to say. The room was suddenly too quiet, too cold. And then in a whisper that didn't tremble, Madeline said, "They think I don't see, but I will." That night she didn't sleep. She wandered through the borrowed home like a ghost, every corner now laced with betrayal. Her mind replayed the laughter, the spoon, the wig. She stood in front of the guest mirror and tried to see what they saw: a senile old woman, a joke, a disposable relic of another time. But what stared back was something different, something sharper. Older, yes, but not done, not broken, and certainly not quiet anymore. Under the brittle chill of a Redwood evening, Madeline stirred a spoon in her tea long after it had gone cold. The steam had vanished minutes ago, and yet she kept stirring the slow metallic scrape, echoing through the borrowed kitchen like a ticking clock. Noah hadn't stopped by that afternoon, which was rare. Normally he'd appear with some contraption in hand, or a random fact to share, or simply to sit near her without speaking. But not today. Perhaps that was a blessing. She needed silence now, not the peaceful kind she'd once cherished, but the kind that sharpens you when no one's looking. The kind that lets pain stretch its legs inside your chest. Since seeing the video, her house, her voice twisted into some grotesque parody. Something inside her had begun to fracture, not all at once, but in fine, invisible lines, the type of cracks that didn't scream. They whispered. She didn't confront Tyler or Jenna. Not yet. That would have been too obvious, too emotional. And Madeline Hargrove did not give people the pleasure of watching her break. Instead, she watched. It started with subtle glances through windows. The temporary home she occupied sat diagonally across from her real house, close enough that the upstairs guest room had a partial view of her front porch. At first, she told herself she was just reminiscing, trying to soothe her homesickness. But then the lights inside her house began flickering past midnight. Shadows passed behind curtains that should have been drawn. One evening, as she returned from the market with a loaf of sourdough tucked beneath her arm, she noticed the kitchen light on, not a lamp, the overhead, full glare. They had no reason to be in her kitchen at 9:45 p.m. That night she stayed up near the guest window. The lights turned off behind her to avoid being seen. She watched Jenna walk into the living room wearing the same cardigan Madeline had once kept folded neatly in the upstairs hall closet. Her feet were bare. She twirled once before the fireplace, then bowed dramatically to someone off camera. Tyler entered a moment later holding what looked like a microphone boom. He laughed, whispered something, then ducked out of sight. Madeline's hands gripped the windowsill. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply breathed through her nose, slow and deliberate, as if forcing her lungs to stay alive inside a collapsing body. The next night, just after 11 Hodra, she pulled on her gray shawl, buttoned her coat, and walked. The air outside was sharp, the kind of cold that stung the edges of your nostrils. Streetlights cast long yellow streaks across the sidewalk. She moved silently, one step at a time, her shoes crunching the scattered leaves beneath. She stayed on the opposite side of the street as she approached her house. Their house now, she reminded herself, temporarily. But it looked nothing like how she left it. The porch was decorated with vintage Halloween lights, the kind that blinked obnoxiously in bursts. A sign hung loosely on the door, "Live tonight, 9 p.m. at Elder Fail TV." Her gut twisted. She kept walking. Rounding the hedge, she moved toward the side window near the living room. It was cracked open slightly for ventilation. Madeline crouched low behind a ceramic planter and lifted her head just enough to see inside, and there she was. Or rather the version of her they'd built. Jenna stood in front of the camera wearing the gray wig again, only now it had been styled into exaggerated puffs. She wore oversized glasses, thick socks up to her knees, and spoke in a voice drenched in ridicule. "I told the raccoon not to eat my birthday cake," she said in a shaky tone. "But does he listen? No, he marries the postman instead." Laughter, off-screen laughter. Tyler's. He motioned wildly with his hands, egging her on. Jenna continued, "Now my curtains are pregnant and nobody believes me. I'm not crazy. You're crazy. Shut up, toaster." Tyler burst into laughter again. Madeline's mouth went dry. She had once believed that kindness came in small gestures, a pie, a mended fence, a smile at her door. But now she saw it for what it was, a script, a role they played to gain her trust. Her home had been converted into a set, and she unknowingly was the punchline to a joke told to hundreds of thousands of strangers online. A gust of wind stirred the planter beside her, rattling the leaves. She ducked instinctively, heart pounding in her ears. A sliver of light fell across her shoes, but no one came out. No one saw. As she turned to leave, her eyes passed once more through the glass. Jenna was mid-monologue, swinging her arms like a puppet unraveling. And then, just for a second, Jenna turned her head toward the window, straight toward it. Madeline froze. Their eyes didn't meet. Jenna wasn't looking at her. She was performing. For the camera, for the screen, for the audience who had never met Madeline Hargrove but laughed at her all the same. She turned away, and she walked. Not quickly, not with panic, but with something heavier than fear. It wasn't humiliation, she felt it was obliteration. She wasn't just mocked. She had been erased, reduced to a caricature, stripped of dignity by people who used her furniture, her teacups, her memories as props. Back in the guest room, she didn't bother taking off her coat. She lit a single candle on the desk and opened her old leather journal, the one with cracked edges and a faded monogram. She wrote, "October 17th. I saw them. I saw what they think I am. A lunatic, a walking punchline, a ghost draped in wool. They mimic my voice and call it comedy. They wear my clothes and call it content. Who am I in their eyes? A relic, a joke, a thing that rattles around in its own madness until it's useful to someone else's fame." She paused, then continued, "Roger, I don't know what hurts more, their laughter or my own silence." She put down the pen and closed the journal, but she didn't cry. Instead, she did what her generation had always done best, endure. That night, she began cataloging things not on paper, not with words, but in her mind. The outfits they borrowed, the schedule they kept, the strange deliveries at odd hours, lighting rigs, sound cables, new microphones, the timing of their live streams, the scripts Jenna seemed to follow, occasionally glancing at an iPad propped behind the camera. Madeline didn't say a word to anyone, not Noah, not the neighbors. She simply watched and remembered. Because if there was one thing age hadn't stolen from her, it was this, the ability to sit in silence and see everything. Noah found her in the backyard that morning, standing beneath the old sycamore tree, with a rake in one hand and nothing in the other. The leaves around her were barely disturbed, as though she'd been standing there for hours, letting the gold and crimson fall without protest. He'd come by to show her a new feature on his drone, a thermal detection add-on he was excited about. But when he saw her face, he didn't say a word. Something in her eyes had changed, not softened, hardened, focused, like the way his dad's eyes used to look when he worked through tax season, tight, sleepless, determined. Madeline looked up as he approached. "Do you still have that old tablet, the one you said could pick up camera feeds?" Noah blinked. "Yeah, why?" She exhaled through her nose. "I need your help, Noah. I need to see what's going on in my house." The boy's expression lit up with something between curiosity and concern. "You mean surveillance?" She nodded. "They're filming in there, at night, during the day, wearing my clothes, pretending to be me, mocking me." He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For a second, the weight of it, the reality hit him. All those videos he'd laughed at, the ones he'd shown her, that wasn't a skit, he said slowly. That was real. Madeline's voice was steady low. "Yes." He looked down at his shoes, ashamed. "I didn't know." "I know, dear, but now you do. So I need to ask you something." She met his gaze. "Can you help me find the truth?" A slow grin spread across his face, half disbelief, half thrill. "Are you asking me to be your tech guy? I'm asking you to help me see what they're hiding." He dropped his backpack on the grass. "Then we're going full mad tech mode." The operation began that afternoon. Noah, now self-appointed chief of surveillance, pulled out a tiny camera kit from his bag, barely bigger than a gum packet. It was meant for filming birds, he explained, or squirrels mid-leap. But with the right placement and Wi-Fi syncing, it could easily double as a spy cam. "We'll need a clean line of sight," he said, already sketching angles on a notepad. "Somewhere facing your living room. That's where most of the live streams happen, right?" She nodded. He pointed to the tree that sat directly across from her old living room window. "There. That branch, see it high enough, steady enough. I'll build a fake bird nest. We'll call it Operation Sparrow." Madeline cracked a faint smile. "You watch too many spy movies." "Correction," Noah replied, dead serious. "I study them." By sunset, the camera was installed. Nestled in a fake twig cocoon, it blinked silently down toward the window across the street. The feed came through clean on Noah's tablet, high-res, wide-angle, minimal glare. They sat side by side in the dim guest room lights off, staring at the grainy image of her house, which had never looked more foreign. The porch was decorated with plastic flamingos now. Her antique mailbox had a sticker on it that read eldercontent.co, and every window glowed with curated warmth like a sitcom set, not a home. Noah tapped record. They didn't have to wait long. At 8:27 p.m., Tyler entered the frame carrying a ring light under one arm and a steaming cup of something in the other. Jenna followed behind, dressed in a polka-dot nightgown Madeline recognized immediately her mother's, one of the few things she'd kept after her passing. The sight of it bunched and careless on Jenna's frame made Madeline's hand tighten around her teacup. "Lights," Tyler said, adjusting the ring's brightness. "Camera." "No makeup today?" Jenna asked. Tyler snorted. "You don't need it. The older you look, the funnier it gets." She giggled, spinning in place before slouching into Madeline's favorite chair. "Okay," Tyler said, framing the shot. "Let's go with the lost in the cereal aisle bit tonight." Jenna shifted arms, wobbling, voice shaky. "I was just trying to find my grandchildren in aisle 4. But the Rice Krispies told me I'm already dead." Laughter off screen. Tyler's. "Cut," he said. "Let's try another take. Add more confusion this time. And maybe throw in something about the microwave being a portal." Noah stared at the screen, stunned. "They script these." Madeline said nothing. Her eyes didn't leave the feed. Jenna reset herself, then burst into the same character again, more erratic, less coherent, wringing her hands and muttering nonsense. "I asked the doorknob for permission to breathe, but the cheese told me no." Tyler doubled over. "That's gold." Noah looked at her. She hadn't moved. Her eyes were dry, her jaw tense. The only thing that betrayed her emotion was the way her thumb rubbed the edge of her teacup again and again, a small, unconscious gesture, grinding, etching. "They've been at this for weeks," she said quietly. "Probably longer." He nodded. "We'll get it all, every clip, every word." They watched for another hour, recording silently. At one point, Jenna changed outfits mid-scene, swapping the nightgown for a floral blouse and headscarf. A costume change. A new character, a new sketch. She's pretending to have memory lapses, Noah said. Like, on purpose. Yes, doesn't she know? That's real for some people. She doesn't care. By 10 Hosers, they had 3 full segments. Tyler directing, Jenna performing, all within the walls of a house that had once been sacred, where birthdays had been celebrated, where arguments had been whispered through walls, where Roger had taken his last breath. Madeline stood and walked to the window looking down at the quiet street below. Her voice when it came was soft and firm. "This isn't just content," she said. "This is theft." Noah turned in his chair. "What do you want to do?" "Document everything. Quietly. No confrontation. Not yet. Let them keep performing." He nodded. "We'll need backup storage, in case they try to delete anything." "Can you do that?" "MadTech accepts your challenge." The following days blurred into a pattern. Each evening they recorded new clips. Tyler became bolder, adding fake testimonials, even staging fake mail from neighbors about how Madeline had once accused a mailbox of stealing her mail. Jenna began taking requests from the audience. A poll asked followers, should Granny argue with a raccoon or the moon next? And each night Madeline sat beside Noah watching it unfold. She never flinched, never wept. But her mouth remained a tight line, as if every word spoken through that camera burned her skin. Then came the night that changed everything. Tyler forgot to mute his mic during setup. They caught him whispering, "After this goes viral, we pitch it to Hulu. Maybe call it the Granny Project." Jenna asked, "What if the old lady finds out?" He laughed. "She's practically senile. She'll thank us for the exposure." Noah looked up from the tablet. "They think you're too weak to fight back." Madeline turned slowly, eyes like flint. "Then let's show them what the elderly can do with a tech kid and a bit of patience." That night she didn't sleep. She began writing. A list. A plan. And in her heart the match was lit. Quiet, controlled, but burning all the same. It began with a mistake. A folder left unencrypted. A shared link embedded too casually in an old Dropbox account. Tyler must have thought no one would dig deep enough, or perhaps he simply underestimated what a determined 11-year-old could do with a few hours and a decent internet connection. Noah sat cross-legged on the floor of Madeline's borrowed guest room laptop, open, his face lit by the soft blue glow of lines of code and loading bars. His tongue peeked from the corner of his mouth in the way it always did when he was focused, really focused. Outside, the wind stirred the leaves along Elm Street. But inside, silence hovered over the boy and the woman beside him like a shared breath. "Got it," he muttered. Madeline looked up from her notebook. "What did you find?" Noah's fingers flew across the keyboard. "It's a hidden drive, not public-facing. They probably used it as a private asset bank. Clips, drafts, backup files. Most of it's junk raw audio bloopers, but there's one folder named Gold Takes, password protected. Can you crack it?" He grinned. "Already did." With a final keystroke, the folder burst open onto the screen dozens of video files with crude slapstick titles. Granny Meltdown, Final, Move Toaster, Fight Extended, Edit, MP4 Bathrobe, Psychosis Full Laugh Track, WMV. Madeline leaned closer, her lips pressed into a hard, colorless line. Play 1. Noah hesitated. "Are you sure? I need to see." He clicked on the first file. The screen flickered. A video began. It was her living room, real, authentic in every way. The armchair, the floral drapes, the framed photo of Roger on the mantel, and there front and center was Jenna, again in costume, again in character, but this time it wasn't her voice. It was Madeline's, the actual voice, lifted from earlier surveillance recordings, distorted and looped. Phrases Madeline had said in private fragments of grief, questions whispered to herself. Old habits spoken aloud, stitched together to form a surreal, humiliating monologue. "Doorknobs can be presidents," the video version of her said, "and I eat mothballs when I'm lonely." The crowd laughter wasn't real, but it played beneath the footage anyway, a studio effect. Artificial, cruel. Madeline's hand gripped the armrest. "That's my voice," she said quietly. Noah nodded. They filtered it, cut and pasted it from the surveillance mics, auto-tuned the edges to make it cartoonish. He clicked on the next video. It was worse. This time Jenna's body had been digitally altered. Her face blurred, and in its place, stitched crudely with a facial tracking tool, was Madeline's own. lifted from old photos. A digitized, exaggerated version twisted into absurd expressions. She looked broken, rabid, demented. And the caption on the clip, "This is what happens when you forget your brain." In 1952, Noah didn't speak. He didn't have to. The silence was enough. It was Madeline who broke it. "I've been erased," she whispered. "Replaced." Noah turned toward her, his voice sharp. "They're planning something bigger." He clicked open a document file. It was a content calendar organized professional grotesque, in bold red font at the top. "Livestream Saturday night. Redwood audience. Truth about the lady next door." Beneath it, bullet points. Scripted confessions. Evidence of delusions. Community testimonials faked. Merch preview. Granny's Gone Nuts hoodie design. "They're going public," he said. "In front of everyone. This weekend." Madeline sat still. Her gaze flicked from the screen to the window where her real home loomed in the dark, like a house no longer hers. "I won't let them define me," she said. "Not in my town, not in my name." Noah looked at her. Really looked at her. For all his jokes and sarcasm, all his knowledge of microchips and proxy networks, this was the first time he truly saw what courage looked like. Not loud, not wild, but composed, terrifying in its clarity. He closed the laptop and took a breath. "Okay," he said. "Let's burn them down." Madeline raised an eyebrow. Digitally, he added quickly. "Legally. Ethically, but also completely." She cracked the faintest smile. "You watch too many movies." He shrugged. "Not enough good ones with old ladies winning." They spent the next 24 hours planning. Madeline sketched ideas on yellow legal pads, drawing diagrams like a war general. Noah built a private editing station using parts scavenged from old-school projects and a borrowed second monitor from his dad's office. At the heart of it all was the footage, the real footage. The behind-the-scenes clips where Tyler coached Jenna on her voice inflection. "Make it more slurred, like she's forgetting words," he said, waving his hand. The raw takes where Jenna broke character laughing and rolling her eyes. "I swear if I have to pretend to pee in a plant one more time, I'm quitting." The mock meetings, the wardrobe fittings, the graphics team emails discussing how to turn dementia into digestible humor. Each clip, each line of text was another nail in the coffin of their act. Noah compiled it all. Cut, trimmed, color corrected. He added subtitles, matched timelines, backed everything onto 3 different drives and a cloud account under an anonymous name, TruthNest RWD. As the timeline unfolded before them hour by hour, they started adding voiceover. Madeline was hesitant at first. "I haven't spoken publicly since Roger's funeral," she said. "But this isn't public," Noah replied. "It's yours." She sat in front of the mic. The first few takes were shaky, then steady, then unstoppable. Her voice carried weight, not performance, presence. She didn't cry, didn't rant. She simply spoke. "They used my voice to sell shame. They used my face to sell fear. But I am not a costume. I am not a glitch. I am not a headline." When she finished, Noah stared at her for a long time. "That was intense," he said. "I meant every word." A pause. Then he whispered, "You're kind of a badass, you know that." Madeline turned her head slowly, one brow raised. "Kind of." He laughed. "Okay, full badass." It was the first time she laughed in weeks. Not a full one, but enough. They went back to work. Noah layered the monologue over the surveillance footage, the laugh tracks, the faked testimonials. He timed the cuts so each lie exploded under the weight of truth. Each clip of Jenna mocking her became a mirror to the planning sessions. Each captioned insult was followed by a real quote from Madeline, measured, wise human. By the time they were finished, the video was exactly 6 minutes and 44 seconds long. Noah watched it 3 times in a row. "It's perfect," he said. "It's not for revenge," Madeline replied. "It's for clarity." But even as she said it, her eyes burned with something deeper. Not vengeance. Dignity reclaimed. Truth sharpened. And the beginning of something neither of them could name yet. That night, as Noah packed up his laptop and Madeline brewed a second pot of tea, something passed between them, unspoken but sure. Not grandmother and grandson. Not mentor and student. Something else. A partnership. A bond forged not by blood but by battle. In the war for truth, they had become a 2-person army, and Saturday was coming. The rain came quietly that Saturday, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. It wasn't a storm yet, just a slow, insistent drizzle that whispered against the windows of Redwood's old town hall. The building had stood there since 1913 with its brick facade and worn limestone steps, hosting everything from school plays to town funerals. But that night, it would bear witness to something else. Not quite a confrontation. Not yet. But something heavier. The kind of moment that rearranges a community. At 3:00 p.m., Madeline arrived with a folded envelope in her hand and her shoulders pulled back with practiced formality. She wore a plain wool coat and boots still dusty from the garden. Her hair was pinned in the same no-nonsense bun she'd worn for the past 20 years. The receptionist at the community desk, a teenager with braces and AirPods, barely looked up. "Sorry, we're not open to the public right now. We've got a reservation for an influencer event tonight." Madeline placed the envelope on the desk and said calmly, "I'd like to borrow the East Hall for 45 minutes, before the live stream starts." The receptionist looked up. "I have approval from Deputy Mayor Clarkson," she added. Inside the envelope was a typed letter stamped signed. It gave her access to the projection system, the main screen, and the audio board for exactly 45 minutes, starting at 6:45 p.m., 15 minutes before Tyler and Jenna's scheduled broadcast was set to begin. The girl's eyes widened a little. "You're that Mrs. Hargrove?" Madeline didn't smile. "Not the one they've shown you, the real one." The girl nodded mutely, slid the envelope back, and buzzed her in. By 4:00 p.m., Noah had already arrived, dragging a rolling suitcase packed with cables, hard drives, and a dusty mini projector he'd convinced the librarian to lend him on short notice. His hoodie was soaked through from the rain, but his energy was electric. He ran straight to the back of the room where a pull-down screen hung like a sleeping ghost. The hall smelled faintly of floor polish and old books, and every step echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "I've tested the audio," he called out, unpacking cords. "It's got Bluetooth support, but it's sketchy. I'm hardwiring everything to be safe." Madeline stood at the front of the room, gazing at the rows of empty chairs. Some still had Post-it notes on them from last week's church bake sale. The room didn't look like a courtroom or a battlefield, but by nightfall it would become both. "Has the livestream link been posted?" she asked. "Yeah," Noah said. "They're promoting it as Unmasking the Woman Next Door." Jenna already posted a teaser reel on TikTok. Got 80,000 likes in under an hour. Madeline's mouth tightened. "Good. Let them gather." She walked to the podium, ran her hand across the old wood. There was a microphone attached, frayed but still functional. Noah set up his laptop, connected the hard drive, and pulled up their compiled 6-minute, 44-second video on the projector preview. The screen went black, then flickered. A frame from the living room appeared, Jenna mid-laugh, Tyler adjusting her wig. Underneath it, the words, "Truth is not a performance." Noah turned back to her. "Are you sure you want to do this?" She looked at the screen, then at the windows where the rain was beginning to streak heavier against the glass. "I've been quiet for a long time, Noah," she said. "Long enough for people to mistake it for weakness. But silence isn't surrender. It's preparation." He gave her a slow nod. "Then we're ready." At 5:30 p.m., Madeline returned home to her borrowed room, to her private ritual. She lit a single candle on the nightstand and pulled the curtain just enough to watch the street outside. The glow of her real house across the block was obnoxious even through the misty rainfall. Strings of LED lights flashed around the porch. Camera equipment sat under plastic tarps protected from the storm. Inside, shadows moved Tyler pacing Jenna, laughing the countdown to their live stream already underway. But Madeline didn't flinch. Instead, she opened the wardrobe and reached for a garment bag that hadn't been touched in over a decade. She unzipped it slowly, reverently. Inside was Roger's old navy wool cloak, the one he wore on their anniversary trip to Mendocino, the one with the corded collar and heavy brass buttons. She slipped it on. It draped over her like armor. In the mirror, she looked strange, ancient and new all at once. The cloak had once been too large on her. Now it fit. Not because she had grown, but because she had earned it. By 6:20, she stepped outside. The rain was heavier now, but she didn't bring an umbrella. Let the cold soak through. Let the town feel the weight of this walk. Every step was deliberate. Every echo against the pavement was a declaration. She walked past the market where she once read poetry aloud on Thursdays, past the old record shop where she and Roger danced when the radio inside played Nat King Cole, past the library where Jenna's flyers now fluttered advertising a live reveal that promised truth tears and total shock. She passed them without pause. At 6:38 she entered the hall. Noah was waiting. Everything was lit. The screen glowed. The chairs were filling. Dozens of curious townspeople had arrived early, intrigued by Jenna's publicity storm. Some were teenagers with their phones raised. Others were older folks, friends of Madeline's, who hadn't seen her outside the bakery in months. They whispered when she entered, but she didn't acknowledge them. She walked to the podium, adjusted the mic, and waited. At 6:44 p.m., exactly 1 minute before the live stream went live across Redwood's social feeds, Madeline nodded to Noah. He pressed play. The screen dimmed. The room silenced. There was no introduction, no countdown. Just Jenna's face filling the frame, smiling, mocking in mid-performance. Then Tyler's voice coaching her, laughing. Then the overlays, the costume fittings, the laugh tracks, the filters, the breakdown. Clip after clip, lie after lie, each one peeled away like a scab. The room did not laugh. They watched. Some turned pale, others muttered, but no one moved. At 6:51, the final frame appeared. Truth doesn't shout, it shows up, MH. The screen went black, and Madeline stepped forward. She didn't yell. She didn't accuse. She simply looked out at the crowd and said, "My name is Madeline Hargrove. I am 75 years old. I have lived in Redwood for 43 of them. You've seen their version of me. Now you've seen mine." Silence. Then a voice from the back, clear, quiet, familiar. "She's right," said Mrs. Lacey, the town librarian. "That's not comedy. That's cruelty." Someone clapped, then another. And soon the hall echoed, not with mockery, not with digital sound bites, but with real applause, measured, human. Madeline didn't smile. She just closed her eyes for a moment. She had come alone, cloaked in memory and soaked with rain. But she didn't stand alone anymore. And as the clock ticked towards 7:00 p.m., the exact moment Jenna and Tyler were set to launch their performance, Madeline had already beaten them to it. She didn't need a stage. She needed only the truth, and it had spoken. At 7:00 p.m. sharp, the digital countdown on Jenna's live stream hit 0. The words "going live exclusive." The truth about the lady next door flashed across the screen in neon red block letters, followed by a jingle, cheerful, cartoonish, entirely tone-deaf. The Redwood Community Hall, dimly lit now under soft yellow bulbs, was packed. Every chair had been filled, the walls lined with curious neighbors, students, town officials, and a small cluster of local journalists holding cameras and notepads. Everyone had come to see what the viral couple next door had promised would be their biggest exposé yet. Everyone expected drama. What they didn't expect was a reckoning. Tyler appeared first on screen, grinning wide in his usual flannel and faux humble posture, holding a wireless mic as if he were hosting a game show. He stood in Madeline's old living room, though it looked more like a set, now washed in artificial light. Minimal shadows, every piece of furniture slightly rearranged to maximize visual appeal. A high-end camera mounted behind him on a rotating gimbal caught every angle. "Hey, everyone," he said with exaggerated warmth. "Welcome to the stream. Thank you for joining us from Redwood and beyond. Tonight's episode is personal, difficult even, but necessary." Jenna stepped into frame, dressed in soft lavender, her hair tucked under a stylish head wrap to appear more neutral. She wore minimal makeup, just enough to suggest exhaustion. Her eyes were wet. "This has been a hard few months," she began, voice trembling. What started as a mission to raise awareness about elderly mental health turned into something much more complicated. A murmur swept through the hall. People leaned forward. Someone whispered, "What's she talking about?" Tyler continued, "When we first moved to Redwood, we had no idea we'd become neighbors with someone as unpredictable as Mrs. Hargrove. And while we tried to be supportive truly, we had to draw the line when certain behaviors became disturbing." He paused. Jenna sniffled, perfectly timed. "We don't want to shame anyone," she said, "but we do believe in transparency, which is why tonight we're going to share with you what we've documented." On the screen behind them, a still frame of Madeline appeared, grainy, mid-blink, caught at an awkward angle, an image clearly selected to paint her as disoriented, lost. Whispers turned to frowns. People exchanged glances. Madeline, standing quietly at the back of the room next to Noah, never flinched. She folded her hands calmly in front of her, her fingers steady. Noah stood beside her like a sentinel, earbuds and tablet connected to the projection system via a discreet wireless switch. Jenna's voice echoed through the live stream. "We're going to start with a video we haven't released before. It's upsetting. Viewer discretion is advised." She raised a remote. The screen at the front of the community hall flickered, but instead of the fabricated clip they had prepared, the image froze, glitched, went black. Then something else began to play. It wasn't their video. It was hers, Madeline's. The footage opened with a timestamp and raw angle of the living room, unfiltered, uncut. Tyler adjusting a ring light. Jenna pacing in a bathrobe and gray wig. No audience yet. Just behind-the-scenes footage. Tyler's voice filled the speakers. Remember, more slur in the voice this time. She's got to sound completely unhinged. Jenna laughed. "Do you want me to add the drooling or save that for the finale?" Tyler replied, "Finale. Build to it." The room erupted into a stunned silence. On screen they kept talking, rehearsing, joking, drinking soda between takes. Then the camera switched to a second angle, one from inside the kitchen, showing Jenna going through Madeline's drawers, pulling out a rosary and mocking a prayer. "You think she knows what day it is," she joked. "I bet she still thinks Nixon's president." Laughter, louder this time from them, not the room. "Not anymore." Gasps rippled through the audience. Someone in the back muttered, "Oh my God." The footage kept rolling. A stitched montage of filtered clips, Tyler's overlays, the laugh tracks, the face-swapping tool, and then intercut with it all real footage of Madeline sitting in silence, talking softly to herself about Roger, about memories. Raw, unfiltered, human. Overlaid on the screen came Madeline's voice, not from a camera, but from the audio they had recorded just days before. "They took my words, my face, my grief, and made it their playground. But I am not theirs. I am not content. I am Madeline Hargrove, and I remember everything." The screen dimmed. Silence. Real heavy silence. Then came the murmurs, sharp, rising like a wave. She trusted them. That's elder abuse. They used AI to fake her face. They broke into her memories. Tyler's live stream camera, still running, captured it all. Not the video he'd planned, not the redemption arc he and Jenna had carefully scripted. Instead, it was the shock and betrayal etched across every face in the room. Live. Public. Jenna, watching from her phone in their living room, blinked in disbelief. What just happened? Why is that video playing? Tyler scrambled toward his laptop. "Kill the stream. Kill it." Too late. The chat window beside the broadcast exploded. "What the hell did I just watch, your monsters? Canceling you isn't enough. This isn't exposure. This is exploitation." Jenna's hands flew to her face. "It was supposed to be our truth." "No," Tyler hissed, slamming his fist against the desk. "It was supposed to be our ticket." Back at the community hall, someone clapped. Then another. Then 20 more. Until the hall echoed with thunderous applause, not of celebration, but of vindication. Madeline didn't step forward. She didn't bow. She simply turned to Noah and nodded. He gave her a crooked grin. "We nuked them." She exhaled softly. "No. We just let them speak." And finally someone listened. As the crowd began to turn toward her, some with hands over their mouths, others already wiping tears, Madeline quietly stepped outside, away from the attention. The night was still wet. The wind carried the scent of pine and something else change. Behind her, the live stream had ended. The charade had collapsed. The truth had taken the stage. And the town of Redwood would never look at the word influencer the same way again. The applause didn't stop when Madeline walked out of the community hall. It followed her first as a ripple, then as a storm. People stood not for the spectacle they'd expected, but for the woman they had overlooked. It wasn't for a dramatic performance. It was for the quiet power of a voice that had chosen not to shout, but to show. And back inside the room, chaos was unraveling. Tyler, still holding the microphone in his trembling hand, stood frozen at the center of the stage. Sweat had gathered at his hairline. His mouth opened to speak, but no words came. Around him, the faces of the crowd were no longer curious or amused. They were thunderclouds ready to strike. "You manipulated her," someone said from the second row. "You broke into her life," another spat. "This is illegal," a voice from the back boomed. Jenna, who had stood off to the side clutching a cue card and a trembling glass of water, turned pale as paper. Her eyes darted wildly across the room, as if looking for a fire exit that could somehow lead her away from everything, every choice, every lie, every piece of mockery turned into monetized pixels. "I didn't mean," she started, but her words were lost beneath the surge of people standing, pointing, recording on phones. And then she ran. She didn't shout, she didn't plead. She just dropped the glass, shattering it against the floor, and bolted down the center aisle in her heeled boots, one of them twisting sideways with a sharp crack as she tripped near the exit. Someone reached to help her. She yanked away. She pushed open the hall doors and disappeared into the cold night. Tyler tried to follow, but by then the crowd had closed in. A local grocer, Mr. Calhoun, 72 years old, and known for being perpetually mild, stepped forward and grabbed his shoulder. "You made fun of all of us," he said, voice steely. "Not just her. Every one of us who's ever forgotten a name or stared too long at the microwave or needed help opening a goddamn jar." Tyler blinked, stunned. It was just comedy. No, another voice snapped. It was cruelty with a laugh track. By the time the officers arrived, called by someone halfway through the broadcast, the tension had reached a boiling point. But it wasn't violent. It was something heavier, cold, legal, unforgiving. Two uniformed deputies entered the hall, cutting through the crowd with clipped, rehearsed authority. Officer Quinn, a middle-aged woman with salt in her ponytail, stepped forward and held up a hand. "Mr. Tyler Monroe," she asked. Tyler turned slowly. "That's me." She glanced at the notes on her phone, already prepared. "You are under investigation for unlawful surveillance, defamation of character, and digital impersonation. We have multiple complaints, including direct testimony and digital evidence." Tyler laughed nervously. "Come on, really, for some TikToks. You filmed a woman inside her own home," Officer Quinn said flatly. "You used her voice, her likeness without consent, and manipulated those recordings for financial gain. That's not content. That's a felony." Noah watched from the side, his tablet still warm in his hands, and whispered, "Boom." Tyler raised his hand, slightly defiant. "I have rights. That video they showed, that was stolen footage. Who hacked us?" But the officer ignored the protest. She stepped forward, pulling handcuffs from her belt. "Turn around, Mr. Monroe." The metallic click echoed in the hall as his wrists were bound. Someone in the crowd clapped again, short, sharp, and then others joined. By the time the officers led him out, the crowd had transformed once more, no longer just a sea of phones and eyes, but a wave of solidarity. It was no longer about revenge. It was recognition. Madeline had spoken without speaking, and Redwood had heard. Outside, rain still fell in a steady hush. The night was colder now, crisper, as if the town itself had exhaled something it had been holding far too long. Madeline stood beneath the awning of the community hall, arms folded, watching the patrol car lights flash red, blue, red against the wet pavement. She didn't blink as Tyler was guided into the back seat. She didn't smile. She just stood, tall, unmoved, whole. From behind her, a shrill voice rang out, "Go, Madeline." It was Noah charging down the steps in his oversized hoodie, both arms raised triumphantly. "She's the hacker of the year, digital justice ninja." The crowd laughed, not mockingly, but with warmth, with catharsis, with pride. "Madeline Hargrove for mayor," someone shouted. "She's our firewall against garbage influencers," yelled another. Noah slid beside her, beaming. "I told you we were going to fry them." She glanced sideways, amused. "You said nuke. Fry nuke, same thing." She looked out at the crowd gathering around them. People stepping forward. Neighbors, former students, old shopkeepers retired, mechanics offering handshakes, words of apology, words of admiration. One elderly woman pressed a wrapped lemon bar into her hand and said, "For your nerves." Madeline took it. "Thank you. I prefer bourbon, but this will do." Laughter, and then silence again. But not the kind that isolates, the kind that comes before something good begins. Across the street, the lights of her home still glowed softly. No cameras now, no laughter tracks, no mockery. Just a porch light she once left on for Roger. "Do you want to go back in?" Noah asked. She thought for a moment. No, she said. Not yet. I want to remember this moment exactly as it is, like a save point in a video game. She smiled. Exactly. He looked up at her, awe flickering behind his rain-dappled glasses. You're my hero, you know. She exhaled slow and steady. Then maybe you'll remember me the next time someone tries to turn dignity into a hashtag. I won't forget, he said, promise. The last of the crowd lingered on the steps, exchanging stories, theories, memories. And in the center of it all stood a woman who had once been laughed at, dismissed, silenced. No longer. Noah nudged her. What now, General Madeline? She looked up at the sky, and then without hesitation said, now we start writing our version of the story. Theirs wasn't the last live stream that night, but it was the one Redwood would remember, and this time it ended not with filters or applause cues, but with real hands clapping in the rain. A week after the storm broke, the chairs at the Redwood Public Library were filled in a way they hadn't been in years. No TikTok cameras, no backlighting rigs or viral bait posters. Just rows of folding chairs, soft yellow lamplight from antique sconces, and the rustle of community members settling in with quiet reverence. They came in cardigans and denim jackets, some with walkers, others arm in arm with grandchildren. They brought homemade cookies, notebooks, and silent curiosity. At the front of the room stood a lectern. Nothing special, just polished wood worn by time. Behind it, a projector screen glowed faintly with a single slide, Stories Worth Hearing, with Madeline Hargrove. It had been Noah's idea. After the live stream fallout, after the police report, the social media backlash, the arrests, and the thunderous support that poured into town like spring rain, people started reaching out. Not just neighbors and friends, but strangers, hundreds of them. From Spokane, from Minneapolis, from overseas, older people, caregivers, widows, veterans, librarians, all with one thing in common: they had seen themselves in Madeline. They had been mocked, overlooked, cut out of stories entirely, or worse, made into punchlines. Madeline didn't ask for a spotlight, but when the library board reached out offering her the final spot in their community voice speaker series, she agreed. Not because she wanted revenge, because she owed it to the version of herself who had once sat silently in that guest room, gripping a teacup, watching herself be edited into a cartoon. Noah sat near the front, holding his phone not to film, but to manage the live stream he'd quietly set up for her. This one was different. It wasn't public. It wasn't branded. It was hosted on a private site he'd built from scratch in 2 days. The name of the channel sat in the corner of the screen: Madeline Tells Truth. She stepped up to the lectern, slowly wrapped in a shawl the color of rust. Her hair had been freshly pinned. Her shoes were sensible. Her presence electric. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear. No microphone needed. "I wasn't supposed to be standing here. A few weeks ago, I was just a woman with an herb garden and a tea set she didn't use anymore." Soft laughter rippled through the crowd. But something happened. Something cruel. Something clever. Something calculated. And because of that something, I got the rare chance to choose what to do with it. She paused, and I chose to tell the truth. Noah's hand hovered near the volume controls. He didn't need to touch a thing. Madeline glanced across the faces in the crowd. "When I was younger," she said, "there was this unspoken rule: children were to be seen, not heard. And when you grow up with that, you think that when you do earn the right to speak, people will finally listen. A beat. And then one day you're 75 and they stop hearing you all over again. This time not because you're too young, but because they've already decided what your story is. They put you in a chair, call you sweet, say you're a little off when you forget a name or ask the same question twice. Then they laugh, they record, they cut, they caption. The silence in the room was a presence now thick and hanging. "But here's what I've learned," she said softer now. Nobody has the right to turn someone's pain or memory or age into a performance, especially not the age. We are not your material. We are not your content. We are not your jokes. She paused, then smiled not bitterly but gently. And the thing is, we're also not helpless, not stupid, not invisible. Somewhere in the third row, Mrs. Donnelly, the retired school principal, dabbed her eyes with a floral tissue. "I've lived in Redwood for 4 decades. I've taught your children buried friends outlived 2 dogs and grown time the right way. And I have stories. So do you. So does every person in this room. So do millions of people who are being silenced with laughter. Madeline stepped back from the podium, her final words landing not as a conclusion, but a beginning. So tonight, if you've ever felt like your story wasn't worth telling, or worse, like someone else was telling it for you, know this: it's never too late to take the microphone back. And then she sat. The applause began softly, hesitant, almost sacred, then louder, until it swelled and broke a tidal wave of gratitude and vindication. Noah stood. Not because anyone told him to, but because he couldn't sit still. Afterward, people formed a quiet line just to shake her hand, to look her in the eye. One woman hugged her and whispered, "You said what my mother never got the chance to." Another man, tall in his 80s, pressed a handwritten note into her palm and simply nodded. And that was just in person. The online stream, small and private as it was, began spreading like wildfire. Not through algorithms or clickbait, but word of mouth. Reddit forums for caregivers, Facebook groups for seniors, Twitter threads from medical students. Noah kept refreshing the server logs. The numbers doubled every hour. A message popped into the inbox of the site's admin account that evening. "I'm 73. I thought I was just an old man yelling at clouds. Turns out I'm just a man whose clouds got stolen." Another, "My mom has early Alzheimer's. I've been so scared. But your voice made me feel like we're still allowed to be human." And another, "I never knew how badly I needed to hear an elder speak without apology." Noah had built the site as a one-off. But by Monday, he'd registered a new domain, madelinetellstruth.org. He posted a submission box: "Have a story, record it, send it, we'll post it." Within 72 hours, they had over 200 submissions, raw, unedited voice notes. A woman describing her first day as a switchboard operator in 1954. A man reciting a poem he'd written about his wife who passed in 1992. A veteran telling the truth about what it's like to forget your best friend's name one day and your own address the next. Madeline didn't curate them. She let them be messy, honest, truthful. Because truth, she had come to believe, doesn't need polish. It just needs room. The local news picked up the story. Then the regional. Then a podcast out of Chicago asked to interview her. She declined politely, but offered to submit a story from the garden bench behind the library if they'd allow wind chimes in the background. They said yes. By the end of the month, her words, once mocked, once cut and rearranged, were being studied in university courses on digital ethics. Noah, meanwhile, ordered more server space. At one point, he turned to her, grinning ear to ear, and said, "You've officially gone global, Madeline." She raised an eyebrow. "Does that come with snacks?" He laughed. "International crackers, I assume." But behind the joke, they both knew something was shifting. Not a revolution, something quieter, a recalibration, a return of dignity to the people who had been cast aside for too long. One night, while sitting on that garden bench, Madeline received a letter typed on aged stationery, addressed in immaculate cursive. "Dear Mrs. Hargrove, I'm 83. I fought in Korea, lost my brother in Vietnam, outlived my own son, but I've never spoken publicly a day in my life. Last week my granddaughter showed me your video, and for the first time in decades, I didn't feel invisible. I sent in a story. You made me believe it mattered. Thank you. H.R. Patterson, Boise ID." She read it 3 times before folding it carefully and placing it beside the others. Later, when Noah asked what she thought the next step was, she said, "We don't need more steps." "We don't know," she replied, smiling faintly. "We just keep walking." And in Redwood, that was enough. Not just for Madeline, but for all the voices learning to speak again. The leaves had turned fire red by the time Madeline and Noah stepped onto Sycamore Street again. The wind was calm that morning, soft like a whisper, and the sidewalk was littered with the rustle of the season's final breath. Each step they took crunched gently beneath them, a rhythm more felt than heard. Autumn in Redwood had always come like a slow, poetic apology for summer's intensity. But this year it carried something else, resolution. Madeline wore her usual walking shoes, scuffed but sturdy. Her coat was deep navy, her scarf wrapped once around her neck with careful elegance. She carried a thermos of tea in one hand. In the other, the crook of her elbow bent just enough for Noah to loop his arm through without being asked. They walked in silence at first, past the library, past the community garden, past the cafe that had renamed one of their muffins the Hargrove Hero Cinnamon Not Too Sweet, no frills. And then finally they turned the corner onto her old street. Her house stood at the end, modest and quiet, no longer the stage it had once been made into. The porch had been freshly painted, the old shutters restored, and the mailbox, once plastered with influencer stickers, now bore a small brass plaque. Stories live here, but the biggest change wasn't cosmetic. It was in the people. 4 students sat cross-legged on the porch steps, backpacks beside them, notebooks open. A teacher leaned against the railing, sipping from a coffee thermos, her eyes scanning a paperback copy of The Things They Carried. Laughter came from inside, soft and overlapping, youthful, unguarded. Noah grinned. "Looks like class is in session." Madeline squeezed his arm. "Let's not be late then." As they approached, one of the girls on the porch stood and waved. "Mrs. Hargrove." Another student looked up. "Are we doing the story about the apple pie today, or the war nurse again?" Madeline smiled. "That depends. Do you want truth or flavor?" A chorus of truth erupted. She laughed gently. "Then you'll get both." Inside the house was alive again. Not with chaos, not with bright lights and curated lies, but with pages turning, voices rising, ideas colliding. The living room had been subtly reworked, still cozy, still hers, but now rearranged with folding chairs and warm blankets stacked in the corner. On one side of the fireplace, a sign read, "Welcome to the listening room." And that's what it was. Not a school, not a retreat, but a place where stories mattered again. Every Thursday and Saturday, students from Redwood High came to Madeline's home as part of an after-school program started by the town's new initiative for intergenerational connection. Noah helped design the schedule. Mrs. Lacey from the library helped curate reading prompts. And Madeline, she simply opened the door. That morning she poured cups of tea as the students settled in. The walls were filled with photos now, not of viral moments, but of everyday ones. A boy helping his grandmother up the stairs, a woman reading to a man with Alzheimer's, a close-up of a lined hand holding a child's drawing. "Today," Madeline began, "we're going to talk about the moment you realize your voice matters." She didn't need a microphone. She had presence, and presence when earned never needs to be loud. A boy in the back, quiet, lanky, always sketching, raised his hand. "What if you only realize it after it's already been taken from you?" Madeline looked at him for a long moment, then said, "That's when you know you're ready to use it." The students fell quiet again, not the kind of silence born of boredom, but of weight, of resonance. She stepped toward the fireplace, now framed with books and candles, and one old photo of Roger still watching from his mantel. "Someone once told me that dignity doesn't require shouting. And they were right," she said. "Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't to scream." She looked out at them, her voice as steady as ever. "It's to stand up." From the back of the room, Noah whispered, "That's the line." She smiled. He was right. The projector hadn't been turned on. There was no presentation today, no video, just people. People choosing to listen. And that she had come to believe was enough. After the session ended, as the students began packing up and trickling out into the warm, leaf-blown street, Madeline walked back to the front door and paused. It was open. She hadn't remembered opening it, but the sunlight poured in full and wide, and beyond it she could hear laughter, real unforced, from the girls on the porch. One of them was telling the story Madeline had just told, but in her own words, now layering it with her own meaning. That was the point. It had traveled. She stepped into the frame of the doorway and leaned against the post, watching them. The town felt different now. Not because it had changed dramatically, but because she had. Because the house was no longer a hiding place. It was a beacon, and the door never closed. As the screen door creaked softly in the wind, she turned her head slightly and spoke not to the students, not even to Noah, who had come to stand beside her again, sipping the last of his juice, but to the air, to the ones who might never find this street. Sometimes, she said, her voice a low hum, dignity doesn't need to be screamed. It just needs to stand up and walk forward. She looked out at the horizon where the town sloped downward into golden fields and the rooftops shimmered under the morning sun. Then she added almost under her breath, and sometimes all it takes is one open door. The final frame of the film fades in, dedicated to the elders who refuse to have their voices erased in the digital age. The screen goes black. Then, "Go tell your story, someone needs it,"